For years, the neighborhood had been calm. Families lived side by side. Lawns were kept in reasonable shape, and everyone knew to mind their own business. At the end of the cul-de-sac lived a man named David, a quiet homeowner who had one true companion, his golden retriever Max. Max wasn't just a dog. He was family. Friendly, well-trained, and loved by everyone who met him, Max was the type of dog that even children felt safe around. But peace in the neighborhood never lasts long when someone feels the need to control others. That someone was Karen. She had moved into the neighborhood only 6 months earlier, and from the very start, she made herself known. She complained about lawn lengths, trash bins left out too long, and even which cars were parked on the street. But nothing seemed to bother her more than Max. Karen despised dogs. Or at least that's how it seemed. She began leaving passive-aggressive notes on David's door, citing noise that didn't exist and accusing Max of being a danger to the community. At first, David ignored it. After all, the HOA never took her seriously. Max had never been in trouble, never bitten anyone, and was always walked on a leash. But ignoring Karen was never enough. She needed conflict. She thrived on it. And soon she escalated from angry notes to official HOA complaints, demanding that Max be removed from the neighborhood altogether. It was the beginning of a battle David never wanted, but one that Karen was determined to wage. And when the HOA sent its first warning letter, David knew this wasn't going to stop. The stage was set for a war that would shake the quiet neighborhood. But as tensions rose, no one could have predicted the twist of fate that was about to strike. The first HOA letter arrived in a plain envelope, but its contents were anything but ordinary. Inside was a formal notice declaring that a complaint had been filed against David for owning a dangerous animal. The words felt surreal. Max, the gentle retriever who wouldn't hurt a fly, was now being labeled a threat to the community. David quickly learned that the complaint had been filed by Karen, not once. Not twice, but 3 separate times. She had reported Max for barking, even though neighbors confirmed he was quiet. She accused him of roaming the streets despite security cameras showing otherwise, and in one outrageous claim, she even insisted that Max had intimidated her while she was gardening. The HOA wasn't fully convinced, but repeated complaints forced them to act. They issued warnings, demanded proof of obedience training, and even threatened fines if the problem wasn't resolved. David felt cornered. He had never been in trouble with the HOA before, and suddenly his beloved pet was the target of a campaign fueled by lies. He reached out to his neighbors, who rallied behind him. Many wrote letters defending Max, and a few even offered security footage proving Karen's claims were false. But Karen was relentless. She began walking around the neighborhood with her phone, filming Max whenever he stepped outside. She muttered loud complaints, ensuring everyone could hear her grievances. And when that didn't get the reaction she wanted, she escalated further, threatening legal action if Max wasn't removed. The neighborhood was divided. Some wanted peace and urged David to comply. Others stood by him, insisting Karen was going too far. And in the middle of it all, Max just wagged his tail, unaware of the storm brewing around him. But Karen's obsession with removing Max was about to take an unexpected turn. By now, Karen's hatred of Max had become personal. She was no longer just filing complaints. She was actively patrolling the street, looking for any reason to point fingers. The HOA board grew weary of her constant emails and phone calls, but she refused to stop. Her vendetta began spilling into daily life. She shouted at David during his morning walks, demanding that he get rid of that beast. She cornered neighbors in their driveways, spreading wild rumors about Max being aggressive. And when none of that stuck, she resorted to printing flyers, plastering them on mailboxes, warning the community about the dangerous dog next door. But beneath her crusade lay hypocrisy. Because while Karen raged against Max, she owned a pet of her own, a pampered, spoiled tabby cat named Princess. Princess was notorious for wandering freely around the neighborhood. She dug up flower beds, lounged on car hoods, and even hissed at passing children. Unlike Max, she truly was a nuisance, but no one dared complain. After all, complaining to Karen was like pouring gasoline on a fire. Neighbors noticed the irony. How could Karen demand the removal of a calm, friendly dog while letting her own cat run wild? Whispers started circulating and frustration grew. People began to avoid her altogether, unwilling to deal with her constant negativity. David, however, tried to remain patient. He loved Max and refused to let Karen's hostility drive him away. But patience has limits, and the pressure weighed on him more each day. Then one evening, everything changed. Princess, the very cat Karen adored more than anything, suddenly vanished. She didn't come home that night, nor the next. And as days passed without a sign, panic set in. Karen, once so confident and cruel, was about to taste her own medicine. The neighborhood awoke to an entirely new atmosphere. Karen, once loud and overbearing, was suddenly quiet. For the first time since she had moved in, she wasn't yelling at neighbors or filming Max. Instead, she was pacing the streets calling out for Princess. Flyers that once smeared Max's name were now covered with photos of her missing cat. Karen was desperate. She knocked on doors, pleading for information. She checked garages, sheds, and even storm drains. It was a surreal reversal. The woman who had tormented David for months was now humbled, brought low by the loss of the one creature she actually cared about. The irony wasn't lost on the neighbors. Many remembered the way Karen had insisted that Max be removed, claiming pets didn't belong in the community. Now here she was, begging everyone to help her find hers. Some felt sympathy, but most couldn't help but recall her cruelty. They offered polite words but little action. After all, why should they bend over backwards for someone who had done nothing but make their lives miserable? Karen's desperation only grew when days turned into weeks. The cat was gone. Whether taken, lost, or worse, no one knew. But one thing was clear: Karen was broken. The same woman who had once marched around with arrogance now seemed fragile, even defeated. David couldn't ignore the irony. Max had never caused harm, yet he had been the target of relentless attacks. Princess, on the other hand, was gone, and the silence spoke louder than words. The neighborhood began to breathe again. With Karen distracted by her own crisis, life slowly returned to normal. But this was far from the end, because the fallout of Princess's disappearance was only beginning to reshape the neighborhood's balance of power. With Princess gone, Karen's influence over the neighborhood collapsed. The woman who had once dominated HOA meetings with complaints now barely showed her face. She was consumed by her loss, and in her absence, neighbors began reclaiming their peace. The HOA, tired of her constant harassment, stopped entertaining her endless grievances. They quietly closed her complaints against Max, dismissing them as unfounded. Without Karen's voice echoing through every meeting, the board began focusing on real issues, like repairing sidewalks and improving community spaces. It was as though the entire neighborhood had been released from a spell. David felt a weight lift off his shoulders. For the first time in months, he could walk Max without being stalked or shouted at. Neighbors stopped to greet him, some even apologizing for not standing up to Karen sooner. Max, oblivious to it all, simply wagged his tail and enjoyed the attention. But for Karen, the tables had truly turned. Whispers spread that she had received a letter from the HOA herself, one warning her about Princess's behavior before she disappeared. Others claimed she had been fined for violating pet rules she had once weaponized against others. Her hypocrisy had caught up with her, and karma had done the rest. The woman who had tried to tear down her neighbor now stood alone, isolated and pitied rather than respected. Still, one question lingered in the air. Where was Princess? Some believed she had simply wandered too far and wouldn't return. Others suspected she had been taken, perhaps by someone fed up with Karen's antics. The mystery added a layer of tension to the story, a reminder that actions always have consequences. And for Karen, those consequences had only just begun. Time passed and Princess never returned. The neighborhood moved on, but Karen never did. Her obsession with her missing cat replaced her obsession with Max. She posted online, searched shelters, and even accused neighbors of foul play. But the truth remained out of reach, leaving her with nothing but questions. Meanwhile, David's life flourished. With Karen silenced, he could enjoy his home without fear. Max became something of a local mascot, loved by families and adored by children. The very dog that had once been branded dangerous was now a symbol of resilience against Karen's cruelty. The HOA took note as well. They began enforcing rules more fairly, no longer bending to the loudest voice in the room. And when Karen tried to raise her old complaints again, she was met with silence. No one listened anymore. She had lost her credibility, her authority, and most painfully, the one creature she valued above all else. Neighbors often remarked on the irony. Karen had tried to remove someone else's pet only to lose her own. It felt like karma's final word, a poetic balance to months of chaos. And while no one celebrated Princess's disappearance, many quietly acknowledged the lesson it carried. Cruelty has a way of coming back around. Karen remained in the neighborhood, but she was never the same. No longer feared, no longer respected, she became a ghost of the person she once was. And for David, life returned to what it should have been all along, peaceful, quiet, and filled with the unconditional love of his loyal dog. In the end, Karen's war against Max ended not with his removal, but with her own downfall. And the neighborhood would never forget how quickly power can shift when karma decides enough is enough.